Hello and welcome to the final session before the plenary today. I'm Parul Bakshi, Fellow Energy and Climate at ORF Middle East, and it is my pleasure to be moderating this session titled The Green Decoupling, Industrial Policy and the New Geography of Jobs. I think over the past 2 days and across sessions, we've been talking about multiple aspects of green transition. And a lot of times the discussions revolve around megawatts and emissions, which of course are pertinent topics to discuss. But an often sidelined, if not overlooked aspect is the fact that green transition is also about people and opportunities. And it has been estimated that about 24 million jobs could be created by 2030. However, what are these green jobs? Where will these jobs be created? And what it means for the broader global south, which is still struggling to kind of move out from the pit-to-port economy. And I think it's an extremely timely discussion to kind of bring in the threads of the different conversations that we've had so far. And without further ado, please allow me to introduce the esteemed panel that we have here. So we have with us Dr. Kim, who is adjunct fellow at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies from the Republic of Korea. We have with us Mr. Paul Katz, who is Senior VP for Social Wealth, Jain Family Institute at the United States of America. We have with us Ms. Cheryl Fu, Head of Economic Strategy and Investments at OCO Global, Saudi Arabia. And we have with us Ms. Shuva Raha, Fellow CEW, India. Thank you so much for joining us today. And let's start with the context setting in the sense of what are these green jobs, where are these green jobs coming about, and why? Like what is the broader framework? So maybe I can begin with Dr. Kim. You've worked extensively on Korea's industrial policy, and so how do you see this spanning out?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. I'm Kim Young-jo. I'm very happy to be here. Yes, 3 consecutive years I was invited to the Cape Town conversation. And I love this conversation because we are more focusing on the global issues and also development issues, I think. And first of all, I'd like to emphasize that the automation, the relationship between automation or AI transition with the job creation. The automation usually take the jobs for the semi-skilled. So only unskilled and high-skilled survive after the push the automation. And now AI just taking more jobs to the upper the skilled job. So that is why now AI automation, AI transition is a kind of the danger for the high-skilled as well. So this AI transition is still challenging for the labor economists. How to create the job. And then many people are talking about many things, many ideas, but I'd like to emphasize that there is no big solution to harmonize the automation and the job creation. That is the very cool and very cold, conclusion for the time being. And the second one is the green transition, relations between green transition and job. In Korea, we estimate that at least 1 million jobs will be created through the green transition in the next maybe 5 years. So it means that the green transition can create the more jobs than we can expect it in Korea. Not only for the manufacturing sector as well, but also the green transition service sector as well. So in both commodity sector and the service sectors, green transition can create the more brighter futures for job creation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. Paul, maybe you've worked extensively in the investment landscape. So where are these jobs coming in?
Well, thank you. A really great question. I just want to say it's a tremendous pleasure to be here with you all, Mr. President. Truly an honor. I'm from a country that every day seems to be finding new problems to create and new ways to contribute to existing ones. So it really is wonderful to be in a space where the energy is positive, where despite challenges, there's a lot of optimism and a drive to create new things. Truly an honor and a pleasure to be here. So I want to focus specifically on the question of where are these green jobs, and I want to think about kind of 2 sites that I think are particularly relevant to these questions. First, mines, right, and specifically sites of extraction of critical minerals, and then special economic zones, which are parts of the strategies of many countries represented here and in the world in general. So with regard to mining and critical mineral extraction in general, I think this is certainly going to be the site of many, quote, green jobs, but these are jobs that are only green in the sense that they are contributing to green value chains, to sustainable value chains. Ultimately, the jobs themselves are about as dirty and dangerous as they come. And so I think what is really critical is that when we think about the role of labor in mining and in extraction, we need to ensure that actually those sites of extraction are at the center of our thinking and our strategizing. Mining, the economics of mining are incredibly challenging, right? Like in the world of finance, there's a term for the smaller junior miners that actually do most of the exploration and extraction, and it's ESCOs, where S is a four-letter word that you wouldn't say to your grandmother. It's a really, really rough kind of economic proposition. And unfortunately, there are a lot of very high fixed expenses involved. It's actually labor where generally there's pressure to reduce expenditures, right? So everything about this scenario, I think, does not favor labor at the site of critical mineral extraction. So I just think having that at the front of our minds is very important. And we need to think strategically about how to actually capture value from critical mineral extraction itself. So there are many reasons why this is challenging. Timelines are long. Commodity prices are extremely volatile. Lithium was mentioned in the framing of this panel, and of course, as many of us know, lithium prices are currently about 10% of where they were in 2022. They're extremely volatile. Demand is heavily imbued with tech risk because timelines are so long. In fact, you could be investing in new mines, and by the time you're actually beginning production, technologies have shifted, so demand is radically different. So big public bets on downstreaming don't necessarily pay off. And that means, I think, that we need to make sure that the fundamentals come first, and that's designing royalty and tax systems that are responsive to price cycles, but that guarantee a kind of consistent revenue for the state, avoiding open-ended tax holidays and unnecessary incentives, regulating environmental and social harms to make sure that these sites are reasonable places for people to work, implementing local content systems that center local employment and procurement and actually encourage the creation of these procurement systems that favor local SMEs, so making sure that there's interface with local entrepreneurs. And I think there are many, many governments that lose more value through weak royalty regimes and poorly designed tax incentives and leakages than they ever gain from unrealized or unprofitable downstream plans and ambitions. And then just very briefly on the point of special economic zones, I thought it was going to be really quick, but now I'm seeing the time is just ticking away. I just want to note that these are tools that so many countries are employing, but they're really not helpful if they are just enclaves, if they are basically little pieces of another country, say a little piece of Germany or China on the African coast. That's actually not going to deliver benefits to the local economy. So they really have to be embedded in local economies, and they need to have programs for SME inclusion squarely in their DNA. It's very important that there be supplier development programs that ensure that local firms can actually win procurement contracts. It's very important to have facilities that small and medium enterprises can access so that what would in other contexts be large, prohibitively expensive capital expenditures can instead be leasing agreements. So I just want to emphasize that these sites where green jobs are going to be created, they have to be designed to ensure that those are reasonable jobs and that SMEs are included as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. I absolutely agree with you on the point on SEZs being embedded within the local economy. And I think, let me bring Cheryl. You've had experience advising the government, and I think a lot of points that Paul mentioned, I could see you agreeing. So yeah, please, what is your take on this?
Thank you. I completely concur with Paul. And I think when sovereigns and governments structure economic development investments into certain industries, the operating spine is incredibly important. So what Paul said around local value capture, ensuring the integration of skills transfer, these things should be in your final investment term sheet, really. And I don't really see that a lot in the Global South. They may make placeholder comments like, oh, you need to hire 10% that are local, but they don't try translate into high-value economic jobs? So I think my intervention here, I'll just quickly summarize. The main point I want to make is with regards to good quality versus quantity of jobs. So primarily, when we approach the green transition, we understand it will create millions of jobs, but how do we look at it from an economic development and investment architecture perspective, right? So who will capture the good jobs, the value chains, and also the industrial capabilities of the future? So good jobs can only emerge when countries actually climb the economic value chain. So I'll speak more about this, but essentially the whole thesis is how do you anchor competitive value chains in your country? So the quality of good jobs really depends on where in the green value chain you want to compete and participate in. The emergence of the green jobs will have three primary layers. The first layer is basic deployment jobs. So these are necessary but not transformative. I'm talking about solar and wind installation, grid upgrades, EV charging rollout. These kind of jobs are one-off because once the project is built, then you don't necessarily develop national capabilities around that. So they absorb labor, they increase the quantity, but they don't build national capability. And the second layer is operations and technicians. So this is good because it's a stabilizing middle. So here you have grid technicians, hydrogen, safety, O&M roles, instrumentation. These create a middle-skilled, middle-income workforce. So I think a lot of the Global South is in this middle layer. So it's essential, but it's not enough. And the third layer is high-value industrial jobs. So this is where real economic transformation happens and where your country can develop national competitiveness. So I'm talking about high-value parts of the value chain like battery chemicals, power electrodes, electrolyzer systems, hydrogen engineering, things like that. So these are jobs that are very hard to automate. And they are also quite transferable from legacy industries like mining or oil and gas, where I work in Saudi Arabia now. And more importantly, they're globally tradable and linked to export markets. So really development happens only when countries move into this third layer. And we see Chile already trying to do this with lithium. They want to move away from exporting ore and to actually move a bit downstream to processing and refining as well. Morocco is also linking renewables to EV supply chains as their competitive advantage. And Saudi Arabia is connecting green hydrogen, green steel, and electric vehicles. So I'll speak more about how to unlock these good jobs later, but I think that's my summary for now, yeah.
Thank you, Cheryl. I think the three layers that you put forth really brings things into perspective. Shubha, does India have the third layer of jobs? What are these green jobs? There's a lot of initiative that has been taken. Are we in the right direction?
Okay, first of all, you asked right in the beginning, what is a green job, right? What is a green economy that we're talking about?
Yes.
There is a technical definition. A job is green if it reduces the amount of resources a conventional job would use, or it reduces the greenhouse gas emissions. So it has a very limited but defined quality to it. Now, today we are taking out, CEW is taking out India's first national green jobs directory, if you will. We've tried to map what could be India's 2047 green jobs in three categories. That's energy transition, circular economy, and bioeconomy and nature-based solutions. And within that, we've mapped 36 value chains. So some of these are battery and EVs and so on. Circular economy has your waste management, recycling, and then you have bioeconomy, nature-based services. So agroforestry, some of the forest producers, et cetera, comes in that. As you've heard, when I've listed, these are very limited areas. Much of these, I would say, are not even completely in the value chain terms green. So if you take a solar panel, the diodes are not green, the wiring is not green, the materials are not green. The manufacturing of the solar panel itself is a green process. So when you start doing that to an economy, to my mind, if we are going towards net zero, all of us, and our definitions are so limited, our mapping is also not scientific beyond a point that is convenient to us. After a point, it becomes inconvenient. Scope 3 cannot be mapped. The MSME chains are very complex. They cannot be tracked. The supply chains across the world are so diverse. They're not tracked across jurisdictions. So what we are starting to do right now is limit ourselves to the very top layer, which we're saying that these are the green jobs. I work in the Council on Energy, Environment, and Water, and that is not a green job. Even that is not a green job. So first definition, I really feel that there is scope for us to completely relook at what is a green job. The second thing that comes over here as a challenge is the economic sectors in which it operates. These are not high-value sectors. And an economically successful country between low-value, medium-value, and high-value goods, you would want to go up the trend. And something that we're projecting for the future is kind of taking us back to the low-value goods, saying these are rurally there, these are MSME things, these are good for the economy. But where I find a problem with this is when you take aspirational economies, we're talking of the demographic dividend, which are young people. Young people's aspirations, in the same chair, 2 sessions ago we had AI. 1 session ago we had the island nation, and I was listening to them, and their definition of green economy, if I had to do it for a Seychelles or a Maldives, the hospitality industry would have to be a green economy, or the reef management system has to be green, and these are not something that we are mapping over here at all. So in the valuation of your goods in your GDP system or your economic system, where is the green economy? How relevant is it? That's the second problem. We have mapped, now India wants to be a developed country by 2047. We call it Viksit Bharat, which means developed India. But in addition to being a developed economy, we want to be a developed society, which involves quality of life, quality of jobs, et cetera, not just income per capita and so on and so forth. We've also declared net zero by 2070. Now, if we do this, our study today that we are launching, and I want to show it here, this fat book over here, I've got only one of, is a state-level mapping of green jobs. This is one of our states, Odisha. We have now done it for the country at a whole. We are looking at around 48 million green jobs by 2047. And you are saying 24 million by 2030. So it kind of lines up. We have a lot of population. And we're looking at about $1 trillion in green job quantification, again, by 2047. I want to contextualize these numbers because by 2047, India will have about 1.5 billion people, already have 1.5 billion, out of which we're only projecting 48 million to be in a green job of this definition. India is projected to be a $25 trillion economy if we go on the current growth trajectory to a $50 trillion economy if we have a high growth trajectory. Green jobs are looked at as $1 trillion of that. That is the delta between us being a sustainable economy overall to being a green economy. And this is where I think the research needs to come in. Our structuring of future industries need to be different, how we look at and how do we green every part of the value chain. So I'm going to share with you in the next round a very interesting study we've done on the coal sector jobs, which will bring us to the geography of jobs. I mean, what makes people move in search of jobs? So when we went, let's say India had the brain drain in the 80s, we went to foreign countries. We were greener than ever before because we had no development. So we had no emissions, so we were pretty green. But that's not what defines an aspirational livelihood. Why do people want jobs? That answer has to be the rationale for making a job green and not the other way.
Thank you so much, thanks. I think the key takeaway from the discussion so far has been that the definition of these green jobs has to be in line with the broader national strategies going forth. And also the demographic dividend lies within the global south. So it is about focusing on the aspirational jobs, as you mentioned. So it's not just about creating jobs and which jobs are we defining as green, but are they in line with the broader nationalistic goals? So Dr. Kim, you've done extensive work on Korea's role, not just domestically, but also how Korea has been focusing on ensuring a win-win situation within the broader global south. Could you share some of that experience with us, please?
Okay, very briefly, because the time is quite limited. 3 days ago, I mean, we had the G20 here in South Africa and in Johannesburg. And then actually, Korea prepared for the many things to pronounce something in Africa. It's a great, very, very symbolic. And so I'd like to elaborate some more about this initiative that Korea, South Korea want to build. The first one is co-investment with the African countries. So co-investment, but not just a general one, but the high-value segment of supply chain. That is very important one. Because now we're talking about the supply chain resilience, and then Korea is really eager to establish the more stable supply chain, especially in the upstream areas of the supply chain with the African countries and also developing and other developing countries as well. The second one is a package deal, a package of the technology, financing, and training people. So 3. So technology, financing, training packages. We are really interested in this kind of extensive and bundle packages. So I think that we will elaborate some more about these packages in the very near future. And third, there is a regional green industrial hub. What I'm talking about the region and this ramification is that not just a local region, but international level, such as ASEAN battery corridors, East African green hydrogen cluster, or Latin American lithium to battery valleys is something very broad. Things of the regional green industrial hubs can be created because the only one we cannot implement something about just confined to just one nation. And then Korea is really interested in the establishing and supporting this kind of regional green industrial hubs. The last one is financial de-risking. That's really important things. Of course, there are many financial experts here, but I want to emphasize that through the blended finance and demand guarantees, then I think that we can elaborate some more things about how to make easy the financing in these areas. So, this is, green decoupling is about the co-designing a green economy, in which competitiveness and inclusiveness reinforce each other. We should do that, something like that. So I think that Korea, as well as other countries, are really interested in establishing this kind of things. Thank you.
Thank you. So co-investing and co-designing. Paul, you've been working on social wealth. So where on the spectrum of social wealth and what you earlier mentioned about the jobs at the mines, but how do we create it beyond that? How do we add to the value creation, and what is the role of investment strategies in enabling that for the Global South?
Well, yeah, thank you so much for the question. It's kind of a dangerous one because this is what I like to talk about most in the whole world. So I'm going to try to keep it together here. Social wealth, as I understand it, basically refers to public assets like sovereign wealth funds and public pensions and public development finance institutions and their balance sheets that I think should be treated as a collective inheritance that is used, deployed to catalyze green industrialization. That might sound kind of obvious, but actually, to my mind, there are aspects of this that are actually quite controversial, especially when you're dealing with more orthodox thinkers in the world of finance, but that I actually think could be some of the sort of more positive dimensions of this idea of green decoupling. It's like one way that I think it could be really valuable for countries like many of those represented here to decouple a bit is to mobilize domestic resources more strategically in ways that are less bound to risk assessments that come from abroad. We've heard again and again that risk perceptions and the country risk premia in countries like South Africa, Brazil, Indonesia, India are really overblown. They're not rooted in objective fact. And there are so many pieces of evidence. We know from the Global Emerging Markets database of 15,000 loans from multilateral development banks that the default rates implied by sovereign credit ratings in these countries are about 3 times higher than objective risk as measured by real default rates. We know that insurance is called on by creditors more often in the United States than in Africa. There's so many pieces of evidence here. I think finding ways to mobilize these domestic resources in service of national development goals, sort of independent of this broader world, in ways that can catalyze investment by other investors is really, really critical. Sovereign wealth funds have been very useful to this effect. I think Africa is maybe the most interesting geography for new development-focused sovereign wealth funds. There are now 15 sovereign wealth funds here on the continent that comprise the Africa Sovereign Investors Forum that meets annually, just met in Lagos, is going to be meeting in Luanda next year. And it's a really great space for co-investment. Lots of great things are happening. FONSIS, the sovereign wealth fund in Senegal, is co-investing in renewables and infrastructure with a focus on SMEs and women-led enterprises. The TSFE in Egypt has been building partnerships with Saudi Arabia, with Abu Dhabi, to really channel a lot of investment in strategic industries. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. There's also something, because we're here in South Africa, that I really want to mention, that I think it's really important to sort of value. I mean, there are so many things that are unique and exceptional about South Africa, and one of those is the infrastructure that exists here for mobilizing domestic pension resources for development. That's really unique here in South Africa. Regulation 28 actually permits up to 45% of public pension resources, which are managed, by the way, by Africa's by far largest asset manager, the Public Investment Corporation, which I understand can, there are many opinions around it, but I think it's really important to recognize just how unique and remarkable this $140 billion public asset manager is. 45% of public pension resources can go to development. In reality, only about 2% do. So, there's lots and lots of room to increase this actual mobilization, but the structure is there. There are specialized investment firms like 91, which exist to offer solutions that in most of the world countries would be eager to have, and we don't have anything like this in the United States. So, I think we're thinking, about IBSA plus Indonesia is kind of one grouping that's come up a lot. It was in the plurilateralism discussion last night. I think that is a really, really interesting geography for thinking what are strategies to mobilize these public pension resources across these countries, because each of those 4 countries brings part of the solution to the mix. South Africa, we've got Regulation 28, we've got this great ecosystem. Brazil has an amazing national development bank, which I think is the model for the world. India has one of the most interesting infrastructure-focused sovereign wealth funds. I think, you've got the elements together, put them together, build the playbook, and, let's get cross-investment happening across these 4 countries and beyond.
Thank you, Paul. I think finance has been this consistent bone of contention during this discourse. Cheryl, let me bring you in. Do you agree with what Paul says, that the ingredients are there, public finance is there, it just needs to be better utilized and directioned better? What is your take on this?
I completely concur again with Paul. I think in my daily experience in Saudi Arabia working on national industrial investments, particularly the point on risk premiumization, constantly I have to negotiate with external Western investors who put the risk premium at 5 times, and we're like, that's ridiculous, and so on. So this is a very real lived everyday experience for me, so I agree with that. I want to talk a little bit about what kind of framework will enable countries to leverage what he just said, the development trajectory for just transition, but more importantly, in my field of work, how do they actually become green industrial champions? So I think there are 3 main areas. The first is strategic focus, institutional coherence, and most importantly, investable industrial platforms. So that's what Paul alluded to, where you have all the elements together, just put it together. But how do they put it together is what I want to get at. But starting first with strategic focus. So this is a very Singapore Economic Development Board discipline type of style. Just pick 3 to 5 bets, not 20, and base it on your national competitive advantage. So discipline is very important here. The question is not just what is possible, but the question is where can you be globally competitive? And that's why I keep talking about anchoring specific high-value value chains in your country. The second is institutional coherence. So you need to build a sovereign operating spine. And this is where Singapore's experience, again, is very relevant, because in order to attract global investors in the green industries, you need an APEX whole-of-government unit that basically aligns your industrial policy, your climate goals, your investment, skills, workforce development, finance, etc. So there needs to be a horizontally integrated single point of contact for global investors so that the government operates as one voice. And the second is you need a lead execution agency for that. So countries, I would say, in the Global South, in our experience, have got lots of good intent in their policy development, but very fragmented delivery, and global investors see this immediately, and that's why they price the premium of risk so high. So coherence is competitiveness. The last but not least, and the most important actually, and I'll quickly summarize this, is to create platforms. So this is the real investment test of investors. It's not just looking, oh, can I build a factory for hydrogen production, materials, or EV, lithium battery cathodes, and things like that. Investors don't just come for one-off subsidies from the government, they actually come for ecosystems. And again, the Singapore playbook here is a reference that I use in my work in Saudi Arabia as well, where first of all, you anchor the investor. So think about it as a queen bee approach. You find the queen bee of the industry that you want, and you do all you can to anchor that. So that's what I mean by strategic focus. Just focus on one, I said 3 to 5, but basically just really one main queen bee. Then they will build a hive around that, the value chain around that. So you get one credible global player, you anchor them there, you build your cluster around it, surround them with suppliers, R&D, training institutes. So I think this training institutes point is quite important because you talk about green decoupling and green jobs creation, and it's all about attracting foreign investment, attracting foreign companies to come and set up shops so you can do skills transfer. But you don't think about ensuring that your workforce is prepared in parallel. So in Singapore, for example, at the EDB, if I were to design an industry around advanced mobility, for example, I would already have talked to the education institutes to ensure that Singapore's workforce has degree programs to support that, because the industry will come online 10 years later. So it's this kind of sequencing that's quite important, I would say, in the green transition. But last but not least, platform creation. So building a regionally competitive hub and platform. What I mean by platform and bundling logic is that you don't just have a one-off project or factory. You really have a whole sequence platform logic where you also tie it to cross-sector applications, you tie it to workforce development, like I've said, you tie it to national outcomes like job creation, GDP uplift, institutional uplift, things like that. And you service it through this one government voice that I told you about just now, and that then becomes your offering to investors, because investors want fast, quick, easy, and convenient. And when they have to navigate all the different fragmented government agencies, most of the time they leave. So that's been my experience. Yeah.
Thank you, Cheryl. So it's all about national competitiveness, which focuses on an ecosystem-based creation. And does India have a queen bee?
You know, I'm going to come down from national to a person, because a job is about a person, right? And the nations can be doing whatever at a theoretic level. I think once you go down to the people, people want jobs that give them certain quality of life. People have no particular thought process about a green job or a not green job. They want a job. How you make your job lucrative is where the national mission is. And that is where the political will is, and that is where the public acceptance is. So having national missions that don't reflect individual aspiration, and I keep going back to this because when we went to the ground and we did a study of 1,000 coal workers and their skilling people and their managers and employers, first of all, 90% of them are educated. Of that, there is the highest paid such job. So when we keep saying, reskill them, you cannot reskill them and downgrade them. A solar job is a lower quality job than a coal mine high-level managerial job, right? And a solar manager. So they would not want to downgrade themselves. We saw that when we mapped even the laborers of coal mines, the horizontal mapping is to iron and steel works or aluminum works or that sort of industry, and not a green industry. So saying that, we will have a green skilling program, and we have in India many sector skill councils and all that, but what are you offering that person? What is the job after that? And then we added, let's say we add urbanization to it. People would not work in an agricultural field, they would rather be a laborer in a city. These are the nuances that are not captured by data and missions that are based only on modeling data, I would say, that have not spoken to people what they want. So that is one thing where migration and geography of jobs comes in, that where do people want to be? The job needs to be there. If they want to be in the village, then please create it there. But if they're going to urbanize, then your urban centers need to have these green jobs or whatever they want to do. That is one thing. My second point, very quickly, not building the ecosystem as green is not going to help, because you're not going to have, you're going to have haphazard legislation, regulations, investments in some parts, your blended finance is happening somewhere, the downstream MSMEs don't have any finance. So this is not going to be the way to build a future-ready system. AI, not AI, doesn't matter. The AI is getting funded. Your nuts and bolts are not getting funded. So you do not have that ecosystem. That's a problem. My final and third point comes in. Who is influencing the people becomes very important. Who is taking this message to the people? Celebrities endorsing things are not there. I mean, so who are the role models of this young generation who are going to tell them that these are the fields to study, that this is the job? You know, your social media, I mean, they're influenced by that. So where is the correct information of what is a green job? Where do you study? Who do you go to? We have to start at the brass tacks, build up. Right now, we are talking here, trying to build down. That is not going to work in the near or long term.
Thank you. I completely agree. I think having a more people-centric, bottom-up approach, which is more inclusive, and I think you touched upon a very important aspect, which is AI. And automation, and I think no conversation today is complete without touching upon that aspect. So before we move to the Q&A, very quickly, just about everything that we spoke about, there is a parallel narrative about how AI and automation is going to impact almost all of our jobs, and sometimes we have to think about it before lunch. So in context of what we've spoken about so far, is there any direct impact in the near future of AI and job creation when we're talking in context of these green transition jobs? Dr. Kim, I think you were one of the first ones to touch upon the job automation aspect. Is there anything you would like to add to that?
No, I'm very dubious
Okay.
about the job creation.
Lunch it is, okay.
Yeah, under the AI revolution. So I cannot say that. Okay, I can say something, but I don't think that I can guarantee it. So I just stop. So still very challenging. I mean, questions, issues that how to create the job. I mean, under the AI revolution. Still.
Thank you, Paul.
Well, just very briefly, there's one dimension that actually I think is somewhat optimistic. I certainly don't know what AI is going to do to the job market, but I mean, it's probably not going to be great for everyone. But there is one dimension that I think is very promising, and that is using large language models to understand value chains in more depth than was ever possible before. I mean, truly the progress that we're making, like week over week, is mind-blowing. You know, Jorge Luis Borges, I think, you know, this Argentine author who like really predicted the future in so many ways, has this short story about a map that is the territory, and I feel like we're almost there now in terms of understanding where, you know, even SMEs fit into these value chains. So I think in terms of targeting precise investment for, you know, procurement-linked investment strategies, let's say, the possibilities are so much greater than even weeks ago, thanks to AI.
Thank you. All optimism is more than welcome.
You know, remember that the Americans are always optimistic. You know.
Cheryl, would you like to add to that?
So I think my fellow panelists have talked about AI. I'll talk about automation quickly. So I think for automation, basically, the first thing is to tie automation to capability building conditions. So what I mean by that is not just have productivity upgrades for your factories and industries, but to pair them in parallel with skill upgrades for your workers. Automation is really not the enemy here. They just reduce jobs, and the kind of jobs they reduce are lower quality jobs. That's why I talk so much about upgrading the workforce and also ensuring you anchor high value jobs, because automation is definitely going to decimate all the factory workers and the basic jobs. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Shiva?
Very quickly, I'm a tech geek. My first 15 years was in IT.com, ERP. I've done all of this. Technology is always an enabler. Technology is not the endpoint, right? So what we have done with digital public infrastructure, DPI, UPI, which are dumber technologies, I would say, we call them dumb tech, versus an AI tech, but that has empowered billions of people. So technology, how it's deployed is more important than what the current fad is. You know, radio was important, TV is important, smartphones were important. I've been through many technology generations. AI is important, but AI is not the be-all and end-all of everything. I think if applied correctly, it can really automate some parts of the work, but human intelligence and ingenuity, to my mind, with 8 billion people, that is the next frontier. How do you unlock the human potential in these jobs and growth?
Thank you so much. So optimistic approach, we can all focus on the upcoming lunch before the plenary, but very quickly, if there are any questions, may I request you to please come to one of the mics on both sides of the room. Please briefly introduce yourself and put forth the question.
There we go. Hi, Siviwe Mhlana. I'm a labor market and development economist at the Wits Southern Center for Inequality Studies. Thank you for opening it up to the floor. I was quite concerned for the time. I think, conscious of the fact that you did say part of this is aspirational, right? And that approaches need to be in line with the broader national development priorities. However, as we aspire for certain types of jobs, I think it's very important for us to actually be cognizant of the reality of this, right? Oftentimes when we're speaking to this question about jobs, it's all on skills, right? It's on the kind of supply side, not really focusing on the demand side, despite the data that has showed that even in the South African case, I've done work on the automotive industry, the past 10 years, we've been shedding jobs. So there is a need, I think, beyond kind of government, there's this interest of ensuring that government supports investments, in some ways, ensuring regulation encourages the private sector, but the private sector, you mentioned special economic zones, the reality is for most countries, they haven't actually led to job creation as expected. So one, how do we ensure, the role of the state doesn't get left out of this conversation, and the role of the state isn't just about supporting the private sector, it's about actually protecting jobs, the ones that do exist. But also the informal sector is left out of this conversation. Majority of the jobs in African countries are informal. We have the kind of waste pickers, we have a non-standard precarious jobs. How do we protect workers in this context and ensure that also gender is a priority in this conversation as well? Thanks.
Thank you so much. I think that's the only question we would be able to take. So thank you. Thanks for the question. Maybe Shiva and Paul, would you like to comment on some of the aspects? I think when it comes to informal workers, India also has...
Yes,
yeah, sure.
Korea is one of the countries who made a lot of investment on AI. So this is not the private investment, it's the public investment, huge amount of public investment now we are now planning. So that areas can create some job creation we can expect. So public or government led, job creation could be possible. And then not only the education and the training sector, but also government itself can create some corporate to spread this kind of AI revolution, I think. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. I take the critique, and I wish I had a very good response. I can only point to a couple of examples where I think there are tendencies trying to push in a different direction. I really think FONSIS in Senegal, the sovereign fund there, it's a pretty small fund, but it is, working quite hard to invest in SMEs. I think this means actually that the special economic zones set up in Senegal have been more inclusive of SMEs than is the case elsewhere. There's a specific focus on, women-led enterprises as a source of funding. Do I think that is sufficient to successfully stand atop all of these giant trends and successfully shout stop and actually move the world from turning? No, sadly not. And I'm actually not particularly confident that there are sort of hyper macro scalable solutions that are going to respond to this challenge right now that I could cite with confidence. But I do think that there are some examples that we can learn from that I think it's at least useful to explore and to elevate.
Very quickly, in India, most of the things are government-led. Our private sector follows government cues. But there have been a couple of moments that I just want to very quickly say. During COVID, when we wanted to give assistance to the informal workers, we came up with the problem that they were not in any database, so we could not transfer the benefits. So after that, it was taken up on a war footing, multiple platforms that started listing even the smallest micro workers. One of the reasons for them to come into the formal network was incentivizing them with small loans, small grants, which was then linked to your identity system and your social security and your mobile system. So that's the jam trinity that we have. A second point very quickly about the gender. We have now started getting gender formally included into our legislation. So one of the legislation that CEW worked on distributed renewable energy for productive use has a specific gender lens based on research data that shows that rural communities which don't want to move to towns, etc., are benefited by having the women work on their time, in their place, etc. So such exists, and that's why I said the granary of solutions that we had at COP29 of South Asia, of the various regions, becomes very important in socializing these stories. Thank you.
Cheryl, very quickly.
It's not a response, just a comment, but I want to thank you for this question, really, because the more I think about it, all the platform structures and architecture that I spend all my time and career in mature economies, like how do I apply that to, for example, South Africa, if there is a whole underbelly of informal workers, they're not even on the system to even benefit from the skill upgrading or whatever government interventions there are. So I'll definitely take that with me as food for thought and expand my thinking on that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I'd say let's keep the conversation going as conversations prompt action. So thank you so much for your participation, and thank you. Thank you all.